Hello guys, my name is Jermaine. Jay's not here today, but we'll be doing the stream on, we're going to be continuing to do the Seagull game, and we'll be doing the stream without Jay, but we're going to be focusing more on the visuals. So I've done some environment changes this week. I'm going to be doing some new effects as well, so new wind effects. So showing how to use the particle system to change the wind and stuff like that. Let me know if you guys can hear me on the microphone as well. Also, I'm going to be doing some water fountain effects, adding humans to the scene, and adding nav mesh as well. So it's quite a lot going on in today's session. So yeah, we might as well just get started. What I'm going to do is just switch over to the monitor and let's just open up Unity. Let me know if you guys can see Unity as well. Right now I've got no feedback video, so I can't really see what you guys can see. So just let me know in the chat if you can see Unity. Great, cool. All right, so just to take you over what we've done so far, or what I've been working on today. So added some assets. I've added a fountain. I've added sort of a cut-off point, a tunnel at the end of the road using Unity assets. Also, I've added some forest trees, or like forest in the background with a mountain and stuff like that, something for like the backdrop and distance. And in the other direction, I've also added like a big cityscape background with loads of buildings and stuff like that, just to give it a bit of variety. More sort of background assets. I've also gone and added a floor collision plane with nav mesh. So that's what this blue stuff is. And what nav mesh is going to be useful for later is adding the humans and making sure the humans can walk around within like the parameters that I've set with nav mesh. So that's going to come a little bit later, but I've also added some cool effects, and the first one I want to talk about has to do with just the wind blowing and stuff like that. So you want to look at this effect first, which hopefully you guys can see on the screen. It's basically the shaking of the trees. The wind's supposed to be blowing the trees and getting a little wiggle from the trees to show that the wind is blowing. So that's a shader that I've created, and that's what we're going to go over today, how to do like shaders to make things move. And also to complement that, I've got a wind effect. So let's just click on this wind effect over here. Sorry if there's a loud noise in the background. There's just a lot of stuff going on in the next door room. Hopefully it's not too distracting. But yeah, we've got this wind effect, similar to what you would see in Zelda. Just a loop-de-loop of the wind blowing, and also we're going to be doing like some variations to this effect, but it's all using the particle system. So yeah, we're just going to get going with that today, guys. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing I want to go through is the wind effect. So yeah, the wind effect is basically what you're looking at here, this curved line using the particle system. And how I created that is, the first thing you want to do is go to, actually let's go to the assets. I created a folder and I called it particle systems. In there I created a material and called it alpha. I also, if you look at the material in the inspector, I changed it to transparent and called it alpha. So just to give an example of how that works, is I just went on create, material, and let's just call it alpha 2. And let's change the surface type to transparent. and let's then go into the base map and drag the alpha color down. So that's what makes it transparent now. This is going to be useful, and we're mainly going to use this for one small part of the wind. So I'm going to delete this one. The next thing I want to do is I want to go into the hierarchy and let's create a particle system. So there you go, it's just popped up on the screen. We've got a particle system. We can rename this wind, or let's call this windy because we've already got wind. And we just want to go through a few of the basic settings. So the first one is I want to change the start delay to 0.05, or actually this is something that we can edit later because this is going to be sort of a one of one right now. The first thing we want to do is actually change the start lifetime to 5. This just is the length of how long this particle system stays live for, and I want to change the start speed to 0. So that basically means that it's not going to be driven by its own speed, but we're going to be using different constraints to create this windy effects for the speed. I want to change the start size of these particles to 0.25. The reason for this is I just generally want a small particle to start off with, and what you can see with these like little particles is there's a box, an orange box outside of all of these particles. Now this is going to be pretty much the scale of the trail that's going to be left behind. So you want it to be generally bigger than a particle, but not too big, so that it looks like a little, like, you know, too fat to be a brush of wind. So we generally want this shape that we've got here. So we need sort of a similar size. That's why I've gone by with 0.25. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go over the emission. So the rate right now is basically every frame it's creating like, or over time it's creating like 10 particles per frame. I want to change this to about 0.2. So now what this is going to do is it's generally going to just, like you can see here, just create 0.2 particles over every few frames. So that's just going to slow down the particle emission amount, which is perfect because we don't need, you know, 10 or 20. You just need something very low so we can actually start creating these long trails. So this is the perfect size for that. Next thing we want to do is we want to go into velocity over time. So first thing you have to do is tick this box for velocity over time, and next thing you want to do is check the curve part for the velocity over time. So now you've got like this particle systems curve. If you don't have that viewpoint for the curves, you could just, it usually comes up once you've clicked on velocity over time. If it's not showing, it will be showing down here. All you have to do is double click this toolbar, and there you go, you get it, it pops right back. So that you want to click on the first one, which is the x-axis, and what I want to do is I want to, you've got a bunch of preset curves at the bottom. You just want to do a flat line. So the curve basically goes across in a flat line, and on right next to it you've got this little digit here. You can change that from 1 to 10, and that basically changes the rate the particle goes over time across that flat line. So now you can see if you want to use this, you can use this similarly for, like, if you want to create like a laser gun or something like that. So this is a cool little trick you can do to create sort of different projectile type particles. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a few different keys to this this curve. So the first one is going to be, I'll just right click and add key. That's basically what I did, and right click again on that key and edit the key. I want to change the time to 0.1. I I'm going to add 3 keys on this red line. So let's add a second key. The second key, I want it to be on 0.2. And the third key is going to be on 0.3. So what I'm basically doing here is creating a simple movement for this particle. So as it travels in the x-axis over time, it's going to have a little wobble, and what this is going to do is going to be the initial part of that loop that you saw earlier. And I'm just going to create a loop that starts from this origin point, loops in between, and then continues on the rest of the origin point. So first thing I want to do is just go to edit key and change the value of this to, let's just say, -10. There you go. Or yeah, -10 should be fine. So now what you can see is it's going, coming back, and then going again. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. And let's just flatten out these angles. So you get little handles once you click on the key. You just want to click on the handle once you click on the key to level it out so it goes flat, loop, and then flat again. So we want to go back onto the next one, which is the y-axis, and we want to do something similar, except for this time we don't use a preset. We stay on 0, we don't go all the way up to 1. On the x-axis it wasn't -10, it was -1. It goes down to, so that's the maximum. It's either +1 or -1. I want to add another key on this, and we want to do, I want to add the key to the y-axis, and this first key is just going to be 0.1. The next one is going to be edit key. Let's set this to 0.15. The next one is going to be 0.25. And whoops. So we're just editing on the time and not the value, so I just accidentally edited on the value. So this one's going to be 0.25, and the next one's going to be 0.3. So on the 0.15 key, so that's the third key across, you want this to go up to 1. So on the value, you just want to set the value to 1. And you want to set, let me just set that to 0.15. And on the 0.25, you want to set the value to -1. And you also want to change this curve to 10 on the time. And let me just change the rotation up here. So it's got a rotation on the x-axis. I'm going to change it back to 0. And there you go. You can see now that the particle is actually going in a loop around, and it's going across. So that's generally what we wanted. You can add some variations to this at the end, but this is generally the automation that we're going for. So I'm just add some more keys and just do some random movements to the end to just make it a little bit more interesting. So it loops and it goes up and it goes down again. That's basically everything that you want controlled on the y-axis. So the next thing you want to do is you want to do a size over lifetime, but right now we don't necessarily need size over lifetime. What I want you to do is be able to visualize the trail. So what we're going to do is just quickly go and click on trails, and you can see now it's added a trail, and that's generally what we want it to look like, but it's using the default particle system. We don't want that. So remember that alpha I was talking about creating earlier, this is where it comes to use. So the original particle dot that we have here before, we're going to get rid of that. So we're going to just go to material and then drag the alpha into the material input. So now you can't see that little red dot anymore, or little white dot anymore. And for particle unit, we particles unlit, sorry, we want to change that to this just thick white particles lit stream. So now it's getting a lot closer to that last piece that we saw there with, or the original particle stream that we saw in the first place. Alright, so now we can start playing around with things like color over lifetime and stuff like that, and whether or not we want to be transparent or not. But let's go for size first. So size over lifetime is right here. If we click it on the particle system, what you can do is you can click on the curve. You can click the end curve. Actually, let's just set the preset to flat. And then let's just bring everything down. Let's just click on this last key and let's edit it and set it to a value of 0. Let's click on the first key, set that same value to 0. And let's add a key in the middle and let's set its values to time 0.5 and value of 1. So you can see now as it starts small, gets larger, and then it thins out the longer it goes on, which is great. The next thing you want to do is we clicked trails earlier, just so we can get the particle trail system up. So what we're going to do is going to go back to trails again, and here we're going to change the the lifetime to 0.15. So now it doesn't have that really long line, you're just seeing a shorter line. The next thing you want to do is you want to do the width over the trail. So if you go all the way down here, you can change this to a curve, and see we've got quite a few curves already, but this one's going to be pretty much the last curve that we need. You just click on the first key on the left and we change it to, let's go to edit key, change the value to 0, and you can see now you've got that taper coming in. So it starts big or starts small and then gets bigger. What we want it to be is we want it to start small, get big, and then goes back to being small again. So we're going to go to edit key, we're going to change the value back to 0, I'm going to add one more key, edit key, change that value to 1, and then we're going to change the time of it to 0.5. So now what you've got is that brush-like stroke that we had earlier. So now you've got another windy trail. So the next thing, a few things you can do to, I don't know, I guess make this a bit more interesting if you wanted to. You can do color over lifetime, and you can add, on the top row is going to be the alphas, so you can add a few more keys to the top row, and then you can just change the alphas on the first and the last one, and then if you see it now, it's going to like sort of disappear as it goes across. So it's maybe a bit smoother of a transition if you like. I kind of like it like that, so I'm going to just drag it over across. Also, if you wanted to get like really sort of, I don't know, I guess creative, or you wanted to do something special with it and stuff like that, you can play around with the textures. You can change the texture to maybe something like where it's got 3 lines instead of 1 thick line. You can also do things like let's say, change the noise, and let's add a noise to it. There you go. So now it's got a bit more of like a funky noise going off on there, and then you can also change the strength for the noise. So I guess that doesn't look as great, but if it's subtle, it sometimes can work. So I just changed it to 0.2. There you go. You've got one of these lines going, one of these wind lines, which is like just gonna add a little bit of like ambience or maybe a little bit of like interest to the scene, just to make it look a little bit nicer. You can duplicate this as well if you want. So on the hierarchy, just click on duplicate, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees, have it going across. Let's get the duplicate as well. 90 degrees, have it going across. So this is where the time delay comes in. So see, we've got 2 here, but we want one coming in a bit later. So let's go to like 0.3 for the second one. Have it going a bit later. Also change this origin point. So maybe just have it going under this one. And maybe we don't want it doing the exact same loop-de-loop thing. So we can just go back into the velocity over time. And let's change this back to a straight line. Now it just goes up and down, and we can go into this controller and change the up and down movement as well. And just do a bit more manual editing. And there you go, you just got that straight line, nice and flowy looking. So I've taken the time to do quite a few of these and just map them around the scene. So if you play the game, you can actually see what it looks like. So anytime now, we've got a few of these that should spawn in. So there you go, you can see these little strokes of wind just coming through the game, and it just makes it look like quite nice. You can imagine with like some nice music, almost like Zelda, you get these little like streams of wind and stuff like that coming in. Some are going straight, some are doing the loop-to-loop and stuff like that. So that's perfect. And what do we have here? We've got some more particle effects, and this is basically what I'm going to go over next. Whoops. How to create this cool water fountain. So using particle systems again, we're going to be doing a water fountain, and this might be useful as like a mechanic in the game later. Maybe you can fly into water and something happens, I don't know, or maybe even the wind can play a part. If it's really windy, you see this wind showing up. Also, you've got like this shader for the windy tree. Or the windy shader for the tree that's happening here, so the wind's blowing very fast, and we've got a shader for the tree. So that's what we're going to go over next, and then we're going to look at that particle system that I created for the water fountain. So to go over basically what we're going to be doing for the shader is, if you've never used shaders before, this is going to be a very simple shader for this movement. We also use something similar to that with the sharks and the fish as well. It's basically a shader that helps move the tree. Now, or move the leaves in the tree to make it look like the wind's blowing through the leaves in the tree. Now, if we had more higher quality leaves and stuff like that, it would look even more realistic, and you can even have some particle systems where the leaves are falling off of the tree and stuff like that. I didn't go that far and do all that stuff today. We could, but seeing as we're going to be going through the weeks updating things, I might just do this outside of the stream. So I might do some extra particle systems where the leaves fall out of the tree, and stuff like that. But it's quite windy outside today, so that's why I felt inspired to do some wind-based features for this stream. Okay, so what we need to do next is we need to create a folder for our shader graph. So what I did earlier was, I think it's somewhere down here. Here you go. So I created a tree shader, and here's the original. Here's the original material that I've created. So I called it leaves. You can see in this little preview mode what it does to an object, and it's also got some inputs as well that will help you control the amount of wind density, the wind strength, the wind speed, and you can use this on loads of other things, or like even if I wanted to use it on maybe some of the other trees or anything else, like if I added some fabric and I wanted some clothes on a hanging line and I wanted to have that moving in the wind, we can do that, and stuff like that. So this is a very useful shader just to add a bit of like secondary animation to your scene, so everything doesn't look so static. So yeah, how did I create this? So let's create a second one. Let's call this one. So you just want to go into your or create a tree shader folder. In that folder, you just want to right click, click on create. Let's click on shader graph, URP lit shader graph, and I want to change this name to, let's call it leaves. Wind. Okay. So yeah, it's just going to be basically what I did earlier, but let me just show you exactly the step-by-step process of how I did it. So you double click on that shader graph. If you want, you can actually right click on the shader graph and create a material for it, and let's call this one tree, or let's call this one let's call this one leaves. I've already got leaf from what I created before. So yeah, when you get to the shader graph, it'll look like this. Basically, this is the output section, and this controls the color, the position, and the normals, and a lot of other sort of crucial elements to most shaders that are in Unity. The first thing I want to do is I want to create a UV position node. So to create a new node, you press the space bar, and I want to just type in position. Now what this is going to do is it's going to be useful for selecting whether or not you want the animation or the shader effect to be taking place in the world space or in the object space. Now this is important depending on how you've created your objects and how you've aligned your object and stuff like that. Like basically with the UVs and stuff like that. The world and object space has an effect on where your object gets shown in the scene and stuff like that. So I'm going to just do it relative to object because I've tested this with some of the models that we've got for the trees in the scene right now already. And what it does with the world one is it displaces it. Even though world is actually a bit more useful, especially if you have wind going over a set of trees and maybe you want to control it going from right to left and it almost does like a Mexican wave. This can be useful for later, but I would recommend using the world setting with your own objects that you've modeled or created yourself. I'm going to use object because the UV coordinates on these models are slightly different to ones I would have created for myself. Essentially because these weren't created with out and out UV. So, but this is necessary just for adding the noise and positional constraints I'm going to add later. So next I'm adding split. This is just going to split up the UVs. So we just connect those. I'm going to just be adding another combine. So now we've split up the UVs. We basically have them out, like with this combine tool we have more output. So in the original position one you only have one output. Now with the combine we've got 3 outputs. So this is going to be useful for the next couple of nodes that I've used. We've also got 4 different inputs as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these inputs together. And what I want to do is do tiling and offset. And so what this is going to do is, this is basically just going to control what it says on the node, tiling and offset of the noise that we're going to add next. So let's just move this all to the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a noise. There we go. Go to noise. And this is going to be a gradient noise, sorry. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use this noise as almost the colors. So like you can say like white might be the movement and black might be the steady, or like however you want to see it. Generally what this is doing is almost like, think about this noise as being like a Brillo pad or something. When you move your hands over it, your fingers are going to move to the bump, and essentially this is what we're doing with the geometry. These are the bumps, and the geometry is moving over the bumps as we drag it across over time. So essentially what we want to do is we want to have this noise move over time, and the geometry positionally is going to move with the noise that we've got going over time. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the tiling and offset and connect that to the gradient noise. And we want to do some, we want to add some different vectors. So in the top left corner, we've got our shader graph, basic operations. So what we can do is add different floats, different elements that we can see. These, once we add them in here and drag them into the scene, they will be editable in the inspector, which is useful for later, because sometimes you've got a shader and you don't want it just to be static or set in stone, and you want to be able to edit some of these parameters. So if I want to go and click on color, this is going to be useful for just setting up the color of the tree. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to change the color to obviously the color of the leaves, which is going to be green, and drag this color out, and I'm going to connect it to base color. So that's taken care of. You don't have to worry about the color anymore. It's not going to be great. The next thing we want to do is want to add 3 different floats. So one float is going to be wind speed. The second float is going to be wind density. And the third float is going to be wind strength. So essentially what we're going to do with these 3 is we're basically going to just be adding wind speed, wind density and wind strength in with these different components to essentially do what it says, have a control over the wind speed, wind density and wind strength. It's generally controlling the units or the position, the numbers that we use for the gradient noise. So let's go and let's just add a few of these to our scene, or to our shader graph. So the first thing I want to do is I want to control. I want to use the wind speed to control the animation over time. So what I want to do is I want to go and type in time. And this is going to control the movement over time. And we're going to use a multiply node. to multiply the time with the wind speed. Right now we've got no units set for the wind speed, which is fine. We can tweak and play around with that later to see what sort of effect that we want to get out of that. The next thing I want to do is I want to drag the output of the multiplier into the offset. So let's just say I want the wind speed to be 1. So now you can see what it's done is it's contributed to the amount of noise that you're going to have. So if you just do, like, let's say 0.2, it should be contributing a lot less. Let's say 10, let's say 20. You can see like the movement of the noise over time. So let's just change that back to 1. And whoops, I've connected the wrong thing to the wrong thing. So let's connect this to the time and offset, and there you go. So I was thinking it looks a bit strange. So you can see now what's happening. So I'm using the gradient noise as the control for the movement. So basically this is what the animation is coming off of. And the animation is basically time multiplied by speed, and then added in with our tiling offset. So it's offsetting the tile diagonally based off of the inputs that I put in. So let's change the wind speed, what I was trying to do earlier, to like 20. And then you can see it's going a lot faster. And if I go back to, let's go to 1.2, and then we're going to have a lot slower sort of wind speed. Now this is going to be perfect, probably as slow as possible, because obviously if we're going to do animations for trees and stuff like that, you don't see tree leaves unless it's a really windy day. You don't see them moving too fast, and we kind of just want a steady sort of animation as well. So let's move these over here. And let's add a add node basically. So let's just go spacebar and do add. And we're going to just connect these nodes together. And what this add node is going to be useful for is basically we're going to be adding some more UV based nodes to our current node setup. So let's get going with that. So let's do alright, let's do let's just try and find the split node. Alright, so let's add a position node. So at the moment you see I've changed the original position to object, so I'm going to do the same with the second one. And after this position node, I'm going to just do a quick split. And I'm going to do a combine. Just going to connect those nodes up and do another node. Let's just do an add. go and have, sorry, yeah, this is the ad, sorry, that I was supposed to use in there. So let's just move this ad. Okay. Cool. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is, once I've done my positional add and combine, I've added another combine here to, like I said earlier, split it into a vector 3. And all I want to do next is add a transform node. So let's go transform to make sure that this space stays as an object space for, so the object doesn't actually move around in different spaces. And let's just change the position. Okay, so for the multiply node, I think I've missed the multiply node. Okay, so after the gradient node, my bad, let's just add a multiply node. Let's go for a wind density. Let's change this, and let's go for that. So now the wind density essentially needs to be 5. So let's just go back to this. Let's change our wind density to 5. Okay, and let's bring that down. And you can see in this main preview here what the end result is going to look like. So let's just keep at 5. And one last parameter that we need to add is the wind strength. And sorry, I made another mistake. So this density needs to go on the scale for the gradient noise. And the wind strength needs to go here. And we're just going to change the wind strength to 1. And there you go. So we've essentially got the whole setup done for the shader. Just save the asset once you've got that completed. Also, if you wanted to have like a more interesting color, you can always change this to like a color gradient. So I think you've got gradient here. You can just use that and have 2 separate colors. Or if you've created your own tree, you can use different color setups as well and play with that, the UVs, to get a different color setup. So let's go back to the scene and see what this looks like on this tree. So right now you can see that it's got like its own color. We can go click on the shader, change the color back to whatever color you want the leaf to be. And you can see now it's got like a slightly different wind movement to the other one. And even if you click on it, you can just change the color individually. So when you change it, you can just change like the wind density. Let's just change this right down to 2. And let's go back up. And there you go. We've got some more interesting looking trees. Now the next step would be pretty much to just, we've got a lot of trees to get through. So I'm not going to do this in this session, but essentially assign these textures to as many trees as you can. And also you can create as many variants as you can, so, or variations as you can. So if I like duplicate this, let's just do edit, let's just Control D, and let's call this one yellow. So this is going to be used in yellow. I'm going to just change this to a similar color, like a golden yellow, like that. And we can use that on this one. I can also change the strength as well, so you've got a bit more motion in the scene and stuff like that. So there you go. It looks a lot more like lively, a lot more like interesting as well when you look at it. And you can just go around like using different colors on different ones, and essentially just play around with it as much as you want. Do as many color variations as you can. And yeah, it should just make your scene look a little bit more like, you know, there's some movement and some stuff going on. All right, cool. So that's part 2 of today's list of things that we're going over. So the first thing we went through, just to call it back, we've just addressed some of the environment changes that we went through. We just showed you how to do a quick particle system based wind effects, and also a first step into shaders, creating this simple shader effect where you can actually move the geometry to create this wind effect. So it looks pretty cool. You can see these trees over here stand out a lot more than the static ones right next to it. So yeah, it's starting to take shape. And let's just add it to some more. So it doesn't work really well on this tree, but this is pretty much set up for the trees that are created by a specific artist right now, called Copernicus, whose work is in our system. And let's just populate some of these trees. Let's see what it looks like on this. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's cool on the bush as well, so you can have fun just like, you know, playing around with it, drag and drop it in the scene. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about, actually apart from adding the humans to the scene, is adding the water fountain. So this one's going to be pretty straightforward. It's a lot less technical, I guess, than the particle effects that we've done before. So we did one for the bird leaving a trail. We've done another trail one today for the wind. This one's going to be a bit more using the gravity modifier on particle system. Particle system already starts off with a fountain, so let's just go and create a 3D object and call this effect, and call this particle system fountain. And if we zoom out of this one, you're just going to see it's almost doing what we want it to do. We just need to add to what we've already been given. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the max particles to 3,500, or like, you know, just a large amount, because we're going to have a larger amount of emission. So we've got this sort of almost particle-esque effect already happening when we change the emission rate and the amount of particles that come through the emission. The next thing we want to do is affect the shape. So the radius at the bottom needs to fit on the little sort of nozzle at the fountain there, so it would be good to just line this up with that. Wherever your sort of source is going to be for your fountain, make sure you address that first. So make sure everything's positioned correctly, so that it looks as believable as possible. So you can always stop this, line it up, and then play it when you're ready. Let's go back and play it. There you go. Next thing you want to do is change the shape or the angle. Let's go for, I'm going to go for an angle of 5 degrees. I'm going to change the radius to radius of 0.2. And alright, it's great so far, but the only thing that's wrong is that there's no gravity. So let's add that. So I'm going to go up to the first section and change the gravity modifier to like 0.5. Let's do 0.2. And there you go, we've got a nice little sort of fountain effect going on. But another thing that you're noticing is the particles as they're coming in don't look that great because of the texture that we've got assigned to it. So we have a bunch of spheres and you can't see really much movement with spheres. So what we want to do is we want to create sort of a simple or a different sort of texture to use. I've created one earlier and it's like this. It's called Splash. I'll just show you how it works. So if you click on the fountain, we go into renderer and we change the material to Splash. We're going to have a bit more of a watery looking effect. And the first thing you notice is it's a bit too big. So what I want to do is I'm going to change the start size to 0.2. There you go. And now you can see a bit more of an effect, of the fountain effect that we was going for in the first place. And you can also see that the source is still not completely aligned properly. So just edit that. I think it's got a bridge snap on. There you go. Alright, one thing I did do was create that little splash sort of effect that you can see here. I just went into Photopea. I started off with 5 dots that I just drew using the brush tool. I then connected those 5 dots using the pen tool to make this little splash effect. I got rid of the black background and I filed, downloaded this or exported it as a PNG. I saved that in a folder like I went on my documents. I then dragged that same PNG into a fountain folder. And the next thing I did with that was I changed it from default to a sprite 2D in UI. And I also enabled alpha is transparency on there, and I just clicked apply once you finish that. The next thing you want to do is right click on that image that you've dragged in and then just do create and create material out of it, and it's created this splash material. But what you want to do in this splash material is change the shader from render pipeline, from URP to universe render pipeline, and then you want to go to particles and choose that. Make sure that is chosen or you won't be able to see this next step. So the next step is once you've got the water in there and you've got the splash effect working, you can change rotation over lifetime, and let's just change that to like 1,000. There you go, so now it looks a bit more lively, it looks like stuff's happening. You can see the rotations as well. You wouldn't be able to see that with the circle effect. And what you want to also do is just change the color over lifetime. And now this is where the particle, you need to make sure you've got the right shader on there, because with just the default shader you can't actually change the color. But with this, you can change the color from as a gradient It starts off as blue and ends up as white, just like you would see with some water in real life. And also you can affect the alpha as well, which is a nice touch. Just to make it look like it's just like, you know, disintegrated. And I'm going to play around also with the size over lifetime. Change the size. There you go. I'm just going to drag the end up to about minus 0.25 or 0.25. And you can also affect the, change the start size, or in the top left corner of the size on the size over lifetime. Change it to 4. Or I'm going to change it from 4 to, let's say, 2. There you go. And now we've got the particle effect that I ended up with. So those are the 3 effects, and this looks pretty cool. This fountain effect. I've already got one in the game, but again, if you wanted to add like fountains, or even you can use this for waterfalls and stuff like that. Yeah, this is a pretty cool effect to try out. I'm going to delete this one because we've already got one. So those are the main effects that I added this week. And the last thing I wanted to go over was nav mesh. Now this is going to be useful for when we add the humans. So basically what nav mesh is a package. You can go to Window, Package Manager, and go into Unity Registry, and you can search for nav. Let's see if it's in Asset Store. If you've not got nav mesh, it should be in the Asset Store. And it should be free. Let's just type in there. There we go. And alright, so this is runtime nav mesh. Alright, so I think this one is paid for. You've got the nav mesh cleaner. But we're just going to go over quickly nav mesh and its uses and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure you're supposed to have nav mesh for free. Anyway. Yeah, if you go to Window and you go to, if you do have nav mesh, and you go to AI navigation, you would get this navigation window pop up. Now you probably won't have all this blue stuff showing up, and that's because I've already taken the time to go in and set up some nav mesh parameters. This is useful if you've got like humans that we're going to add from the Anything World browser, and we're going to drop in, and you can just add a human with a random movement script, but then have a nav mesh so you can use the human and ask them to move only along the nav mesh region. We'll go into more detail about how all of this stuff works next week, because we're running out of time this week. But essentially, to get the nav mesh blue sections to show up on the houses, on all of this stuff, you basically just need to go in to an object, click on the top component in the object hierarchy, and then you need to set it to static. So what I did earlier was I went over the scene and I set most of these buildings to static, and I also created a floor, so with a collider in there. So you can't see it right now, but it's basically this orange line is the plane that I'm using for the nav mesh. I've added a mesh collider to it, or it comes with a mesh collider. I've added an alpha material onto it, so if you want to see it, I'll just have to just drag the alpha up, and there it is. I'll take it away, because we just need it for its collider and its nav mesh properties. And I then, in the navigation panel, I went to object, the object side of the navigation panel. I changed it from navigation, I ticked navigation static because it is just going to be the floor, it's not going to move. I also went to bake, and I clicked on bake. So when you bake it, it takes into account everything within its region that is static, and it creates a parameter where you can use the nav mesh agents and they can only walk in this parameter. So I haven't done, I've still got some stuff to add, like the truck, the chicken truck, a few, I think the farm building, actually the farm building is made static. There's cars there, so that's cool. So yeah, there's a few things already that's working with nav mesh, so that's great. If you're using the Unreal version, for most of the scenes, example scenes, if you're using example scenes, nav mesh is going to be set up, and also with the Unity version, the nav mesh is going to be set up in the example scenes already. But that was just generally a little fly through of how we do the nav mesh and stuff like that in anything as well. It's a cool feature, especially if you're using like AI components and stuff like that. So now let's just get these character, or populate the scene with some characters. So let's just have, let's add a fireman, let's add a builder, let's add some, I guess he would be working in a city, a business guy. Let's add the nurses, maybe some police officers, a soldier or two, and a businesswoman as well. So these are going to be the people that's just going to be populating our scene. And there we go. They're all just being added right now. Oops. There you go. So we've got all our humans in the scene. Next thing you want to do is you want to just go and add empty. I'm just going to create humans just to clean my hierarchy up. A humans game object, empty game object. I'm going to just drag all these humans into this object, and having them with their animation is going to be super useful for just adding a bit more life to the scene, especially when we're just flying around the game, playing the game. And let's hope that these guys, because these buildings don't have any real colliders on them, I'm going to be relying on the nav mesh agents. Let's hope that these guys don't run into the building. So let's go and add nav mesh agent to this humanoid. I don't know who this guy is, I can't see him. Oh, it's the fireman. Cool. So let's see. Let's add a nav mesh agent to the fireman. Let's do the base offset. So you can see this little tube is the nav mesh. Basically, it's the size of the nav mesh agent. So let's just change the height of this. And then let's change the radius as well. Change the height some more. And let's just change the base offset to like be down here. So this is generally on nav mesh. So let's see, I'm just going to check now how many errors and glitches I'm going to get. So I'm going to go straight out of my game view back into scene just to keep an eye on these nav mesh guys. There's a lot of stuff going on in the scene now. We've got a lot more geometry, got a lot more particle effects, and now we've even added like nav mesh agents. So so they're all walking around this circle because of the random movement script. But let's change the goal position of, they're all going to get run over a massive tractor. Not fun. But let's change the position or the target of the fireman. So I just need to find it on the list. Goal position, let's change it for X. And let's just change it on the Z. So he shouldn't run through this wall if his nav mesh agent doesn't let him. And there you go. Alright, so you can see that his nav mesh agent isn't letting him run through the wall, which is perfect. And if I did that also with the builder, just for comparison, his nav mesh agent should allow him, because he doesn't have one, to run through the wall. Let's see if that's the case. So he should be able to run through the wall because, yep, there you go. So that's the effect of the nav mesh agent. So it's perfectly good and works perfectly fine with our 3D objects. So if you've got any like random movement and stuff like that that you want to add, or if you've got some behaviors that you've chosen to add for your 3D humans and stuff like that, I think next week with Jay we might be doing something where we add humans, we give them some random movement behaviors and stuff like that, and then they just walk around the scene with the nav mesh agent. Maybe they walk up and down the pavement and they avoid buildings and stuff like that, and they can also be carrying food and stuff like that. So that's an element of the game that we want to add. But for today's session, we've pretty much come to the end. Thank you guys for tuning in for this week's stream. My name is Jermaine, and I'm gonna say a good thank you and goodbye.